Hello, everyone, and welcome to the start of a brand new series where we are going to be going on tour. We are going to be checking out virtually all the tracks that F1 has ever been to. Not just this season, but their entire history. It's completely at random as well, so we don't know what the next episode is going to bring until the end of the video, so stay tuned until that. But we are going to be taking a look at every track that has ever been raced, whether that be for one race, whether that be for the entirety of the F1 calendar. And we're going to start with Detroit. Now, probably the first thing you think of when you think of Detroit is what you see to the right of me. Now, either you automatically think of Motown, or you automatically think of rock, like Alice Cooper. It's normally music that is the first thing that comes to mind when it comes to Detroit. And yet, actually, Detroit is technically more famous for cars. It's also known, there is Motown, yes, but Detroit is known affectionately or inaffectionately, I don't know, as Motor City. You see, the big three American car companies, General Motors, Chrysler, Ford, they all have their head offices in Detroit and have had there for some time. So, in a weird way, if you were to have a Formula One track, an American Formula One track, surely the first place you'd think of is Detroit. Well, strangely, Detroit is one of the tracks that would probably be last on everyone's list of circuits that they'd look at. But during the 80s, Detroit was looked into. Now, there's probably a good reason for that, which is down to the fact that Detroit at that time was struggling. The car industry was struggling. Everything was struggling in that area. And so they would have wanted to find a way to make money again, and Formula One is a great place to increase tourism, increase everything, get people going to the hotels, getting them to go into the entertainment and everything like that, spending money, spending on Detroit, and Detroit becomes rich. Fantastic. Recipe for success, surely. Well, that's what Detroit first thought. And so, because of that, from 1982 to 1988, we had the Detroit Grand Prix. Now, we have the track layout here. Now, it's a street circuit, and what I love about the way that this is laid out, Detroit Street Circuit, is the fact that it is a street circuit. You hear the term street circuit that's used nowadays, and normally that just means tight barriers, normally. And actually, these street circuits are held in car parks, they're held in places that aren't streets. But this is held on the streets. This was a genuine street circuit. In fact, if you wanted to take a screenshot or a photo of this map, you could go to Detroit right now and drive around the circuit for yourself if you wanted to. Now, this particular track was a difficult one to do. It was technically difficult as well. You can see that there's actually hairpins on there everywhere. I think there's a tunnel, very much like Monaco. Basically, this was Monaco of America. In fact, it took it one stage further because this track had a railroad crossing. Yes, you're crossing a railroad on your slick tyres in a car. Good challenge. Interesting challenge. Nice. It was considered one of the hardest tracks in the 80s to drive on for Formula One. It should have been a recipe for success. It should have been a recipe for success. This would have been the perfect way for Detroit to get their money. Right? So, why did it not work? Well, I'm showing you a picture of the Detroit Grand Prix, and hopefully this might start to detail a little bit of the problem as to why Detroit had so many problems. So, the first thing first is the calendar organisation of Formula One in the 80s was terrible. I mean, it sort of is now, but it was awful in the 80s. You see, this was a street track. This was genuine streets that were being driven on during the week. Manhole covers, the entirety, the lot, right? Drivers driving around it during the week, so heating it up. And there's going to be Formula One drivers that are going to be heating it up even quicker. And they held it in late June. The hottest weeks in the calendar for Detroit. Everyone knew about it. That was how it was. Now, because of that, the track kept breaking up. Stuff was being dug up. Basically, you were getting potholes on this circuit. Now, Detroit were willing to repair the roads. They had to, right? So the spending of the money was there, and they were begging, absolutely begging, for this to be put in a winter spot or a spring spot, at least so that it was enjoyable as a race for fans and drivers alike. Now, because also it was on a street circuit, it was also everything was temporary, the pits, everything like that, and it was all in a very bad state, and there were complaints everywhere, and everyone was pointing fingers at everyone. Well, basically, the drivers are pointing fingers at everyone, and fair enough on this, and the organisers pointing fingers at Detroit, and Detroit was pointing fingers at the organisers. Let's break this down a little bit. The drivers hated this track because of it being broken up. It was damaging the cars. The heat was almost unbearable. We've known drivers to faint in the heats because of the excruciating way in which everything is. So they were complaining everywhere. The organisers were having a go. We mentioned about Detroit having a go at the organisers, wanting it held in a different part of the calendar year. And the organisers were having a go at Detroit for not improving facilities for the teams. Now, there is a cliche and a buzzword and a quote that is used a lot in terms of business, basically, which is you have to spend money to make money. Now, if there is ever an industry where that applies more than anything else, it is Formula One. Now, we can't really speak in sort of too much in old terms, we don't know, but the millions and billions that circuits pay Formula One to host tracks gives you an idea of what we're talking about here. And then obviously they have to look after their own tracks. Now, here's the thing: Detroit would have got a lot of money out of this in terms of profit, in terms of getting the finance coming in from the hotels, from the casinos, from literally everything. But they had to spend the money first. Those facilities, getting the track in a decent layout, all this sort of thing, there would have been things they could have done to improve the quality. And them spending the money would have meant a better track for the drivers, better conditions for the drivers, better conditions for the teams, better conditions for the fans. And here's the thing: have you ever been in a situation where you enjoy a weekend so much that, particularly if you're on like a driving holiday, you stay there for a little bit longer? An extra day, an extra night. That would have happened if Detroit had spent the money. That would have happened if it was organised in a better part of the calendar year. But by year 6 of this being a racetrack, drivers were complaining. They were fed up. They did not want this track anymore. Now, that's a sad thing, really, because it meant that the money that could have gone to Detroit when they needed it so much wasn't going to be there anymore. Now, thankfully, the track is still in use by auto racing and everything like that, just not Formula One. And like I say, if you wanted to go around the area, I'm sure it'd be amazing. The way in which they laid it out, brilliant, everything like that. But sadly, it's no more. But thankfully, this was a good warning lesson for everyone that wanted motorsport in their area. Detroit have come out of this okay, because the fact that their street circuit, once they'd learnt all the lessons, it then became a hotbed for auto racing, for IndyCar. Fantastic. They've got what they needed. And other circuits in the late 80s and the early 90s started to get wise to this because of these warning examples. The circus and the circuit the situation we find ourselves in, where all F1 tracks are amazingly held for the most part, is because they are learning from bad examples. And everyone's come out of this actually not too bad. It's positive stuff. It's really, really positive stuff, at least for Detroit. So, I mean, for 6 years, there was a lot of drama, there was a lot of chaos, but it was still 6 years. There's not really much for us to dig into. Probably the last thing to just mention is those ones that won. So we had John Watson that won, Michele Alboreto, a jerk by the name of Nelson Piquet, Keke Rosberg. That's the second time we've mentioned his name in recent times, and Ayrton Senna won it 3 times. It was a wild track. I mean, a wild event, and good fun to drive around. Just wish it would have been when it was a little bit cooler. Oh well. Detroit has learnt, we have learnt, and now everyone's happy. Ish. So that is Detroit. Are you guys ready to see what track we're going to be doing next? Well, the Wheel of Names is in front of us, I think. Well, it is now. So let's see where we're going to be going next. We're going to... Oh, it's going to be juicy. It's going to be juicy. We've got the Nürburgring. Oh, boy. That one's going to be a spicy one, guys. Ready for the Nürburgring in the next episode, coming next week.